Okay, can everyone hear me? I'm gonna start. Okay, first, thank you to everyone who's joining today for the Ideas Alumni Series, Ideas After Ideas. My name is Laura Michelon. I'm a lecturer here in the technology studio. First, so Mariana couldn't be here tonight, but I did just want to quickly give her a thank you for helping put this together, as well as Valerie, Travis, and Jen. Literally could not have done this without any of you, so thank you. For tonight, I'm going to introduce the alumni. They'll each present for 15 minutes. We're going to have a short panel discussion afterwards, as well as a Q&A. And then afterwards, we have more food and drinks, so please stick around and talk to the alumni as well as everyone else. I'm very excited about tonight's presentation. I think I started this first because I was getting a lot of questions from students about, well, what's next? What do we do after graduation? What do I do with this degree? And these are all very similar feelings that I had when I was at school. So for me, it was like, well, let's just get together some shining alumni so that they can talk about their experience, and then maybe it can help us find our paths afterwards. So tonight, we are lucky enough to be joined by Ebrahim Pustinci, an award-winning designer, artist, curator, and inventor. He's assistant professor of architecture and founder-director of the Robotically Augmented Design Lab at Kent State University. He's the founding principal of Studio EP. His research focuses on the intersection of design, world building, space, media, and robotics, emphasizing an alternative reading of post-digital discourse through UI, UX, human-machine interaction, physical computation, and tangible interfaces. Ebrahim completed his post-professional degree in architecture under Greg Lynn at UCLA and holds a bachelor's degree in architecture from the University of Tehran. We're also joined by Sharifa Abdul Salam, who is a senior urban designer and planner at SCJ Alliance with over 9 years of combined architecture and urban design experience. She received her master's in architecture from UCLA with the Now Institute in 2016, where she focused on data-driven, transit-oriented urban planning and sustainable development on various scales. More recently, she's been focusing on the benefits of introducing the unconventional cable-propelled transit for public transportation within urban environments. We're joined by Eric Broberg, who I don't see you right there, okay? Who is a design researcher and design technologist at the HKS Line Group, who's dedicated to increasing design workflows, iterative energy modeling techniques, education and surveying, testing new technologies. He's also a previous touring musician and an educator where he fosters those techniques in both practices. When not at work, he enjoys surfing and hanging out with his dog Goose, who is unfortunately not here tonight, but maybe next time. He's an alumni from the technology studio. And then last but not least, we have Gestamani Rumpani, right there, who is a designer and researcher with a focus on visual development, storytelling, and technology, currently working as an innovation manager at Google R&D for the built environment at XL Construction. With boundless energy and about 6 years of professional experience, her body of work spans from residential architecture and public installations to design research, prototyping, and 3D visualizations. Monia holds a MArch II degree from UCLA and a 5-year degree in architecture from the National Technical University of Athens. So please join me in welcoming our distinguished alumni. Awesome. So Ebrahim, you're up.
Perfect. And the mic is connected, so I'm gonna be loud. Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much, Laura, and for the great introduction, and UCLA and Val, and everyone involved for the invitation and for hosting such an exciting event. I'm probably going to be the boring one today. So I'm really looking forward to see the next presentations from here on. So what I'm going to talk about today is, being graduated for, maybe like 8 years, 9 years now, I'm talking, trying to compress the whole thing in maybe 10, 15 minutes. I'm trying to talk more about how UCLA and ideas formed my vision more than maybe specific projects, and how it relates to what I'm currently doing, which deals with something like I like to refer to as fuzzy architecture. And we'll kind of talk about it a little bit further. So the projects that, most of the projects that I eat here, you'll see more or less a brief kind of demo of them there. But I think that the range of the projects, or the main concept, is really focused on a rather now kind of familiar concept of blending digital and physical and kind of bridging them, which now is kind of more or less out there, or it's been out there for a while. And I would like to phrase it, or kind of like connect it in a way to the idea of post-digitality, whatever that term is, which I don't think we know. It's just a kind of fluid meaning, but more of a provocation in terms of what can be the next or the second turn, as Karpov would put it. So it ranges from world building, as you can see, to cyber physical installations, or kind of like real-time design fabrication setups, all the way to animations and robotically animated objects and things like that. And then also connects heavily to what I would discuss a little bit further into interface design in my work. So it deals with the way that I would like to frame it as UI and UX design in architecture. So ranging from the way that we think about architecture as an extension of software through kind of interface design, or the way that we think about building or architecture or built a space or a space at large as a kind of hybridized, multimedia kind of a thing, or kind of like being. So I think for the and again, you see that throughout the projects, ranging from teaching material to, again, some of my earlier study here at UCLA. So it's really kind of seemed to be the thread that connects all of these projects together. But to be a little bit more honest and fair, I should reveal some secrets. So I'm a formalist, and that's the only, or maybe one of the main labels I wear. And that's not really a secret. So you can really see it through the work that we have at museums, or speculative design, or apps, or drawings, and all the things like that, even curatorial work, or kind of like design work and product. And as I mentioned, you'll see it in some of the teaching stuff, from the urban design material, all the way to objects, all the way to animals or animal objects, and so on and so forth. More to illustrate visually some of this stuff, in a sense that kind of give you a visual context of some of the materials that I'm going to talk about in a way that it is really a dialogue between, again, as I said, maybe it's already an kind of an overused term, but like a dialogue between a digital and physical environment. But the way that I look at it, or the way that I try to look at it, is more through world building, but even before that, through interface design and user experience design. So ranging from cyber physical controllers, which we're going to talk briefly about, software development, hardware development, and all of that, and all of it gets into like spatial cyber physicality. And I'm still a formalist, as mentioned, and you can still see that through some of the work. Yeah, again, I think it's not a secret, and I think it's been always the same way. But again, I think for me, it's always interesting and funny to see to look at it, through a bigger picture scenarios, from design studio material to my own work, to the work that we do at Rad Lab with controllers and everything. So there seems to be like an almost constructivist kind of approach towards form and formalism, in a way that everything exists through form. It's not necessarily an architectural take, in kind of contrast with functionalism, but it's rather kind of more of a vision about like the whole thing. And again, you see it even through our research. But to go a little bit even before that, so that's more or less what I was even at the time that I got to ideas, in a sense that I was a formalist always. But here's the timeline after graduation, which feel free to read it in a chronological way, which I usually try to not talk about it in a chronological way. And of course, all the interesting things that happen and all the kind of ups and downs, which you only see the ups, I think. There are a lot of downs. I think if you go a little bit further back, I think for me, it started from this more or less to get familiar with UCLA ideas. And this is a quote from Greg. When the Mark II program was getting more and more attention, and that caught my attention even recently, looking back at it, that it's to promote, the program was to promote critical practice by emphasizing an applied research. And next year this happens, so they announced the Ideas Campus, the launch of the Ideas Campus. And then I got into a plane, came all the way from Iran here. So I started an immigration process, which is it's another like full-time lecture, I would say. And then these happen, like the exposure, I would say, through Ideas program. And of course, I think a lot about the studios already. I try to, or like to, talk about not necessarily what I learned here directly through the studio, but the exposure that we got in terms of relationship with industrial partners and so on and so forth, and just different readings of the same or kind of like similar topics. And I like to talk more about the projects usually when I present in an, again, non-chronological way, but in a way that they build up. So from software design to hardware design, to custom-made robotics, to cyber physical, almost physicalized digital experience, and physicalized other experiences. So it's more or less like this. So it's the way that it builds up, kind of critically or kind of in an intellectual sense. But I think something that kind of came with me throughout the whole way from UCLA was some of the interests that were built, during the time here. So the critical and theoretical agenda in terms of interdisciplinary kind of approach towards architecture and space, architecture with capital A as a kind of larging from object to urban. And you can read it. But again, exposure, I think, was the biggest thing for me. And it continued through the, after graduation scenarios. One of the most influential things, I think, for my current, like where I am right now, was Sylvia Levin's exhibition at Mack Center, Man versus Machine, that was again looking into creativity and retooling creativity, through interface. And I think that I still carry. And then after, what I'm trying to say is that the study or the experience wouldn't stop after graduation. And recently, I think what I connect the most with is the Mario Karpo's, reading on Second Turn. And, within the very first pages, there is a quote that the first digital turn through 90s was to change the way we make, which, is all about digital fabrication and all of that. And the second is about the way we think. And I think I would add to that the way we experience, the way we understand the spatiality, and so on and so forth. So I'm still a formalist, and with that, I'm interested in digitalizing the physical and physicalizing the digital using architecture and built environment as extended software, as a UI basically, and as a medium for UX. And I am interested in using tangible technologies as a vehicle or as an intellectual vehicle to challenge the kind of mundane qualities of digitality. And I do that through what I would say, again, quote unquote, a reading of post-digitality through human-machine interaction, human-computer interaction with some degrees of autonomy. And I label it as fuzzy architecture, which I'm going to go quickly. It comes from fuzzy logic. So it's something with degrees of truth. And I think about digital and physical the same way. So with that, I'm going to walk you through quickly through a couple of examples of these projects. Some controllers from 2017, No Keyboard, No Mouse was a seminar I taught at University of Kentucky when I was there. And it really deals with a kind of a physical hardware software interface to enable everyone to more or less design within a software without necessarily programming or kind of doing design. That continues still to 2020 with O1, which is a recent project. I wish it didn't have the audio, but then it is. But it's a kind of custom-made, AR kind of controller that you can, put your phone and. Yeah, I mean, I think you get the concepts. I'm probably gonna skip to the next one before I embarrass myself. But it's basically a phone-based, custom-made, in-home kind of handheld AR device. Again, as an interface. But I think one of the ones that maybe connect a little bit more with what I do is a custom-made robotic hardware software platform, which was a custom-made robot called Robobil, which I developed in collaboration with Salah and Marcus at the time that I was at Washington State University for right after graduation. This is 2015. And I was there as a research faculty. So it's really an interface, I would say, or I would like to talk about it as an interface that is hardware and software, and it's basically a phone-based physical mesh that you design at the same time as you fabricate. So basically, it's a kind of putting both together a kind of a low poly mesh, probably with a 3 pressed, in Maya. So it's softer maybe than a low poly mesh. And it's, again, a live animated physical mesh modeling process outside of the computer when, as I said, you simultaneously design and fabricate through just a cell phone app. And some of the stills of the installation at Museum of Washington State University. So the second category, I think, deals a little bit. So it says child robot, the one that we didn't see. Yeah, this one. It's a project that, again, from another of my seminars at Kentucky, Kent State University, where we looked at cyber physical or kind of hybrid storytelling. I've used very familiar, and it's already like way outdated, but like image tracking and kind of like image, AR with image trackers. And we used the combination of a cyber physical setup that we had, which is combined of a robotic and a custom-made, app or custom-made AR app to narrate a story and to kind of like talk about the experience. So it was a multiplayer or kind of multi-layered, multiplayer kind of experience in real time, where the physical robot was directly, and I think it's 2017 or so. So again, some of these are already outdated, but the physical robot is interacting with the augmented reality content and tries to narrate the story. And most interestingly, I think, is the fact that because of the experience being, because of the fact that the experience is being experienced through kind of a cell phone or kind of a Oculus, if you will, in a sense, the audience could be part of the scenario as well. So they could join, they could look at the scene through the lens of the robot, they could become part of the storytelling and the narrative. And again, I think this was the initiation of another kind of bigger project that we did recently in 2020, as I was invited to run a workshop for Arcadia conference in 2020 after pandemic. And you can scan it, and that takes you a little bit to the web page that has a little bit more information about it, which was called Augmented Robotic Telepresence. So that was like a very basic idea of how we can host a workshop at our lab, Rad Lab, without having people like physically there. And I think Rad Lab was one of the very first platforms to, I would argue, architecturally, that started to look into telepresence and telerobotics. And this was really the initiation of it. So we started to look into presence as a two kind of, we kind of made presence into a naive reading of it, let's say, which was only broken down to motion and modification. And that happened through kind of online robotic motion, which was kind of able to move around our audience. And also augmented reality as a way to kind of modify our physical lab. So we made a lot of twins, as you know, with these projects. One in Rhino to control a web-based kind of interface API to control the robot at the same time in a kind of live setting. And then we did another one in Maya, and then we did another one in Unity. And then the physical setup was there too. And then this is more or less the whole workflow of the experience. So it was basically enabling our participants from across the globe to take control of our physical lab, move around, modify the way that we were experiencing the lab by adding elements in AR. And really the whole thing was kind of being streamed online, and they had the control to move the robot the way they wanted. And as I said, the whole thing was being streamed online through the lens of the robot, through the lens of ourselves as kind of like people like physically in the lab, and through just the general kind of third person eye. So this is a custom made kind of interface that we were using for walkthrough experiences to kind of again animate the physicality of the robot. We were at the same time kind of streaming, as I said, everything on the on a web page for the audience that they were not running the robot at that moment, so they could really see what's happening, and they could see the whole project through the lens of others. This is, for instance, just gonna probably speed it up a little, just so we get here the AR experience. And this is again what we see in the physical setup, which was the face of the person that was running the robot, again as a kind of present person on the screen. And like they would see around, they would kind of look around, they would kind of change the stuff in a kind of augmented reality sense. And I'm just going to speed it up a little. And the whole thing was as a kind of just physical experience, was streamed in 360 live on YouTube, and they could like someone could join us in that way as well. So these are more or less the type of projects that I think I would argue is digitalizing the physical world. So it brings some digital qualities, and I think it's kind of different than the way that, for example, someone like Jill Retzin would talk about digitalization or digital. It's more about digital quality, not digital system, that comes out of the computer and applies to the physical world. And it happened through the experiences that we saw. And that kind of grown into some of the projects or thesis projects that we were doing at the time. This is a thesis by Mona, which we haven't published yet, so I kept it short also for time and that purpose. But it was a kind of a collaborative, human-machine interaction to build the stuff in a kind of cyber-physical sense, with some level of agency for the robot to make decisions. And I think the next and last category is where we are looking into physicalizing the digital, meaning like bringing some of the experiences from the physical world into a digital environment and make it a little bit more maybe medium specific. So one object at the time was the exhibition that was invited to curate for A+T Museum in Los Angeles, with an amazing roster of participants, which some of them are here, luckily. And it was basically looking into the idea of, again, like post-pandemic exhibition experience. And it was trying to really bridge the idea of, again, world building and mix it with curation and try to bring some level of agency to the game for the users and for participants to be part of the curatorial and design effort. And the bigger question was how this whole experience changes when we go from physical exhibition to digital experience, to digital exhibition. So it was becoming an interactive world, as you can see, with some, again, level of agency for the users, as you can see. And again, let me walk you quickly through the world. So again, there were moments that you could interact with the world, make an ephemeral kind of changes or additions to the design, or kind of like reiterate the experience or reiterate the curatorial aspect of the exhibition by doing interactions. And it was an real-time multiplayer VR experience that was kind of one of the goals for the project. So everyone could join at the same time and interact with each other as well as the world through both VR experience and a web-based or game-based kind of PC experience. So maybe I just pass through this because I'm not sure how am I doing on time with the thing. I think I'm over. So I just run these a little bit quicker in the favor of just giving you some footage of the experience and then leave it up to the website to do the rest. And again, we had the web-based experience of it as well, just so we can include more audience in different mediums. So, and that really is basically kind of a museum shop scenario where you could design your own postcard using your favorite artists' kind of objects and as 3D brush. So that again, just to quickly go through that, and these are some of the footages of that experience with some of the objects from the participants. And as I said, you can see it here. I think again, I feel I'm over time, so I'm just gonna pass the last project, which is kind of a musical duet, which for me brings this whole experience together a little bit in terms of a cyber physical dialogue between a kind of human improviser and a robot. And as I said, I think I'm interested in the way that digital technology can change the way we think and experience. As a formalist who is, does all the things that I think I mentioned, I'm just skipping. And thank you so much for your time and attention. Thank you.
So if you're here to discover what kind of spectrum for work that you can do after ideas, me following Ibrahim is the best thing. So I'm a senior designer and urban planner. I'm a senior urban designer and planner, sorry, at SCJ Alliance. I attended UCLA back in 2015, 2016, did the Urban Strategy Studio with the Now Institute, which is an urban strategy and research wing of Morphosis Architects. Since then, I've been working as an urban designer, but prior to that, I was actually working as an architect designing single family homes. So at 2015, I made this drastic shift in scale from working at a singular object element in a city into designing cities as a whole. So what I'm going to do is I'll begin with telling you about what we did back at Ideas with my team, and then how that influenced and continues to influence till today what I'm working on. Okay. So at UCLA, in our studio, I was part of a team of 12. So the project we worked on was actually a part of a much larger UCLA initiative that was called Grand Challenges. So Grand Challenges is a research initiative that where UCLA brings researchers, faculty, students, community members, experts in their fields, bring them together and try to do research to solve what UCLA considers the toughest problems of our society. One of the two problems that UCLA was focused on at the time was the Sustainable LA Grand Challenge. And that grand challenge was that by 2050, a considerable amount of population increase is expected to come into LA County. At the same time, we have the rapid climate change that we're witnessing and the continuous droughts in the area. So how can we, with all of this considered, achieve three important factors? One, enhanced ecosystem health overall in the county. Two, achieve 100% locally sourced water. And three, achieve 100% reliance on renewable energy. And of course, you can think there are scientists, there are specialists who work in these specific fields. And then you also have the architects who can design buildings to the highest environmental standards to reduce emissions, reduce consumption, and so on. But the big question for us was, what can we as urban designers and planners do in order to contribute to achieving LA's sustainability goals? So before diving into any solutions, what we had to do was to really understand the problem. So what we did is we looked at layers upon layers of GIS data, information out there from all the scientists that we worked with. And we started mapping and mapping and mapping all of this information so we can understand what it means spatially and what if if there were any correlations between all the different layers of data that we were looking at. And just to give you an example of some of the layers of data that we studied were like population density, housing typologies, income, water consumption in the different neighborhoods, energy consumption in the different neighborhoods, modes of transportation that are used, the highways that go through the area, air pollution, and all of these combined together. What does this mean for the bigger problem for sustainable Los Angeles? And then what we did is we took this information and translated it into a set of flowcharts that explain our understanding and analysis of what are the causes and effects or inputs and outputs for all the factors that impact what we're trying to do. And you can see from all of this, where's design? We're supposed to be designers, this is all research. But the big lesson is you can't really propose a good solution unless you know clearly what your problem is. And I know this got really frustrating for some of my colleagues at the time because they wanted to get their design juices flowing. But, you know, one step at a time, we got there eventually. In the past month and a half of the program, we got to design. So what we did is to strategize for our problem for Los Angeles, we looked at the problem in 3 different scales. We looked at the county scale, an urban corridor scale, and then a neighborhood scale. So for the LA County scale, what we did was return to the main problem. We're expecting a considerable increase in population, 1.5 million coming to LA County. Where can we put them? So we created 3 different scenarios. Scenario A was the densification model, was let's look at corridors where LA County is proposing robust public transportation networks in those areas, and let's concentrate all the population there. Scenario C was just let it be as it goes. There's going to be infill in areas with low or no population density, and then a hybrid model in between. And then what we did is we looked at the different building typologies that we need to add to the county in order to achieve these different scenarios. So you can see the top row for scenario A, we need a lot of high intensity and high density buildings that are focused around public transportation. And then scenario C is more the single family home, very much LA character, backyard pool, nice quaint neighborhoods. And then what we understood is when we compared the different energy consumption and water consumption based on existing typologies in Los Angeles counties and similar typologies that exist all around the world, we could analyze what the future consumption of this addition could be like. So you can see from the top row that it is considerably reduced if you go with high density buildings in the future. So this is how the built environment translated to our consumption problem. This led us to our densification model. What we focused on was Wilshire Corridor. So Wilshire Corridor is a 16-mile corridor that LA had planned a subway line that connects all the way from downtown LA to Santa Monica. Unfortunately, today, real life, the subway stops at the VA because of budgetary issues. It's too expensive to tunnel. But for the sake of the project, we took the subway as initially planned all the way to the beach. And we wanted to see how can we bring this 1.5 million into this Wilshire corridor and accommodate everything while achieving LA's sustainability goals, or at least taking a few steps as urban planners closer towards those goals. So we looked at the different neighborhoods along this corridor and the different characteristics of these neighborhoods, the different capacities, the different existing building typologies. And you can see the chart in the bottom. It shows you the differentiation along this corridor where with population density, with income, with consumption, and how those really interact with each other and become the cause and effect of what's happening along the corridor. We then studied different scenarios of density distribution along the corridor. So do we want to do uniform distribution all along the corridor, or do we see opportunities for heightened density at certain areas and then reduced at others? And what can the corridor offer, and what kind of neighborhood characteristics do we want to develop for each existing neighborhood along the Wilshire corridor? So some would argue like, hey, but Wilshire is like very iconic and you're going to completely change the character of Wilshire Corridor in Los Angeles. The argument is Wilshire Corridor is only 1% of the area of Los Angeles County. So what we're trying to achieve here is the big picture. What if we densify 1% of LA County, maintain 99% of LA County, like the people love it, with their neighborhoods and homes and backyards and pools, and at the same time, we're absorbing this 15% increase in population and maintaining every green space that's available outside of the county, sorry. So this is what we were trying to achieve. Densify 1%, preserve 99%. So after we were done studying the Wilshire Corridor itself, we moved on to the neighborhood scale. We broke down our team that was a team of 12 into smaller teams of 2. And my partner and I got Century City. And what we were trying to do with Century City was creating this new central business district for the region, or as one of my dear friends used to call it, it's going to be the baby downtown for LA. So what we did is that we developed a set of frameworks, as you can see in this exploded image, that could guide our design for this new neighborhood. So we have the existing block structure. We have certain buildings that we want to maintain because of the importance and significance of those buildings. And then we have the new layers. We want to add micro-mobility. We have an open space network. Those are no longer going to be golf courses. They're going to be public parks accessible to everybody in the region. And then from all of this and all the new building typologies that we're introducing to Century City, we came up with the new consumption for the neighborhood as well in terms of water, energy, and then how much open space we're going to provide to the public. And then we're all architects here. We understand the value of a compelling visual to deliver an idea that, hey, this doesn't look all that foreign. It could happen. It could be very realistic. So it fits in the Los Angeles already dense urban fabric, as you can see. And this is New Century City. So this is what we did at UCLA, at Ideas. I was done with school, got a job. Now I have real clients, real budgets, real projects. And to tell you the truth, the process is not all that different. So one of the projects I worked on was in Nevada. It was a greenfield project, and greenfield means there's nothing existing in the area. It's not really a greenfield in southern Nevada. But so the objective was to develop a complete master plan. Since it was greenfield, it means we needed road networks, building typologies, distribution, land use, pedestrian network, open space network, and open space typologies, and all of these. It was about 100 acres. You can see it in this teeny tiny orange triangle at the bottom of the screen. But all of these elements that I described to you are the framework. So it's similar to what we did for Century City. But also, before starting any design work, we had to look at the larger region. What's there? What's the history? What are the demographics? What's the market trends like? Housing market, job market? What are the attractions in the region? All of this we had to really understand before we can start designing a successful master plan to serve this region. One other cool thing about this project is that after designing the master plan, we had to also put together a document for design codes and standards, which is a document that architects would later use to design the buildings of this master plan. And this was kind of fun because I got to put on my architect hat since I worked in architecture, and I know what I would be okay receiving as instructions and what I would hate receiving as instructions. So we wanted something that's descriptive enough to create a cohesive neighborhood, but not too prescriptive that architects would end up hating us. Another really cool project that I worked on was a much, much larger project. What's really neat about this project is that it was a very, very similar strategy to what we did at Ideas. The objective of this project was the project was almost the size of a country, and they're doing like a complete revamp of the entire area. So the objective is let's urbanize only 4% of the land and let's conserve 96%. Our role with my team was to work the 96%. So we're looking at the larger region right now. But again, not too different in terms of process. We looked at all the available information and data layers that were available and that were done by the client by gathering all the information with a robust team of scientists over there. And this time, because we were working on a larger region, some of those layers were like flora coverage or fauna migration patterns, and how we can design our conservation plan to protect all of these and enhance the environment that's existing in the area. Generally speaking, conservation plan was our top priority, and then that led to informing the regional mobility plan and the visitor experience plan. Think national parks where people are allowed to go and what kind of accommodation they can have within those national parks. And then where are areas where are no-go zones, just completely for nature to rehabilitate itself. And then all these three frameworks informed our final regional land and marine use plan, because we actually had to plan what can be done and can't be done in the water area as well of this plan. The last project I want to talk to you about is something that I've been focusing on more recently, which is cable-propelled transit, or simply put, cable cars in urban environments. So what we're doing for one of the projects is connecting Union Station in downtown Los Angeles to Dodger Stadium. So Dodger Stadium is the largest MLB stadium in the United States, in a city that's predominantly reliant on personal vehicles. So everybody drives alone. It's located on top of a hill with only few access points, surrounded by residential neighborhoods. The residential neighborhoods hate game days because everybody drives through their neighborhoods. So it's horrendous. And it introduces a lot of disruption in terms of traffic, pollution, noise, and all of that that goes with fans coming into certain areas. So what we're proposing seems very, it just makes so much sense. How about we fly, use a cable car, since this is sitting up on a hill, use a cable car to connect it. So this is what we're doing with this project. It's a lot of fun. It's moved way ahead right now. And then what's also really interesting about introducing something like a cable car for transportation within American cities, or let's call it US cities, because they do that already in Mexico and South America, is that because the system is so unfamiliar within urban environment, it has a built-in novelty to it. So the ride in itself becomes an attraction. In addition, you'll get cool views of downtown, cool views of the San Gabriel Mountains. So, and then you also have the potential of using station areas for placemaking and really revitalizing areas that could use that in the downtown and Chinatown area. So there's a lot more to introducing systems like these than just the transit factor in itself. So just to conclude and wrap this up, what I've been focusing on more recently with my company at SDJ Alliance is looking at this potential. How about grade separation? But instead of grade separation for public transportation below grade, where it's more expensive, where the Purple Line can't go all the way to Santa Monica anymore, how about we look at grade separation up in the air? We tend to limit our thinking and planning to the surface level or the zone around the surface level. And even if we want to introduce dedicated transit as simple as bus lanes, this could take up so much of the surface area. So what does it mean when we go into that extra layer of air? What if we unlock that area and then do something with that? And this way, we're not only avoiding congestion that happens on the surface, we're also alleviating congestion from the surface. And this could mean providing more space to pedestrians, more space to active transportation, more space to street trees, more space for active store and restaurant frontages. So there's a lot of potential that can be done if we think as of our public rights of way as not just a surface level, but a three-dimensional zone that runs through our cities. So just to recap, from everything that I've done throughout UCLA and then following that, what I wanted to say is that urban design and planning is very broad. It does not really limit itself to designing. There's a lot of learning to it. And I think, in my opinion, this is what keeps it always exciting. It's an ever evolving learning journey. So you get to research, you get to study, you get to strategize, implement, experiment. And then one thing for you guys as students at UCLA, I think you're very lucky. Just remind yourselves that you're very lucky. I like to call LA a charming chaos. It understands it has a lot of flaws and problems, but it's always willing to work on its problems. It's always willing to test new and bold ideas that are not previously tested in American cities. So it becomes an attraction for creatives. And if you guys consider yourselves as creatives, then you're in a great place. Thank you.
My name is Eric Broberg, computational designer, HKS Klein, graduate of the technology studio for Guventia Zell in 2017, I think. 2017? Yeah. Anyway, so I appreciate being here tonight. Thank you for setting this up, Valerie, and everybody else involved. This was great. Let's change screen. Okay, so what is HKS Line? I'm going to talk about my position first, and then I'll talk about how I got here. So HKS Line, first off, LINE is an acronym. It stands for the Laboratory for Intensive Exploration, and we do our best to make that a reality. So we bridge the gap between our firm, academia, and the industry as a whole. So we're effectively HKS's applied research team. And so we operate as a hybrid between a traditional design team as well as an applications development team. So in that case, we support sector support. We energy model. We do complex geometry creation, optimization, and as I said, application development. But at the core, we're a design studio. So that means we have constraints. We can't just, so we strategize, analyze, optimize. So we basically are bifurcated into two pieces. We have a design section, we have a software DevOps application development section. And there's about 6 or 7 of us scattered around between southeastern, so South Florida, Dallas, and the West Coast, San Francisco and Los Angeles. And as I said, we're designers. So the first thing, well, I'll get to how this happened, but what you're looking at is a way one of my directors developed a novel technique for, so we built the SoFi Stadium and designed it. We didn't build it, we designed it before I joined. And my first day at HKS Line, when I went into the Dallas office, you guys might use a Grasshopper plugin called Elk. If you haven't, you should. And it takes and parses OSM data and turns it into polylines, roads. Anyway, so this guy is a whiz, and he heads the DevOps team. And the first thing he said to me was, okay, I wrote this algorithm to create a hash cryptography algorithm that there was 37,000 panels on that SoFi Stadium. And what they did is they took everything and converted it to a text file. It was signed by the architect digitally and sent to the fabricator in one shot. He asked me to look at it and figure out what he did. I looked at it and I was baffled. It was thousands of lines long, probably 20 or 30,000 lines long. So since then, I figured, well, the best way to figure out what he did was to try to do a few things on my own. So first thing I did was write a purging algorithm for Revit, and it's still under development, but it worked on and then get pushed aside. So this helped me figure things out. And then I started doing some application sector support, and hospitality looked at a study where they wanted to figure out nurse paths and see if their plans worked and were efficient. So we worked out this, which is a variety of a different software, some other programs here for working with Revit, with work sets, using Dynamo and some C# exposed to the Revit API, which is pretty vast and concerning. Before I joined, they were doing energy analysis using Radiance. If you guys have ever used Ladybug and Honeybee, Radiance is what is running behind the engine. And this is the San Francisco airport. And this whole terminal was analyzed, which would normally take days, and it was done in a couple hours with cloud computing. But this is old school now. We could do this on our personal PCs pretty quickly these days. But anyway, it's just some iterative energy modeling that we do. This is something I did to test the viability, the radiant of a skylight versus no skylight. This is for a project that I can't really tell you where it is, but it exists. Lately, I've been doing sports roof optimizations, and right here is another stadium that will remain nameless. But what we're using here is Design Explorer, developed by Thornton Tomasetti engineers, and it's really great because it has a lot of implications. So I run a say 70,000 simulation, probably, and I'm doing different parameters. I have the input angle, extrusions, different criterion that will affect how the stadium is shaded. And what we want to do is run an optimization algorithm using Galapagos or Octopus. They're essentially evolutionary solvers, and with that, we'll let it run, and it'll eventually try to maximize or minimize a function. And the function we're trying to maximize here is we want to maximize shading while minimizing surface area of the roof, because the roof is what's so expensive at these stadiums, because you have these acrobatic roofs. I wish I could show pictures, but I mean renders, but I can't. Anyway, so this here is really great because you can take those 70,000 exports, upload them to Google Drive, and then you can run them into this JavaScript interface here, and you can start pulling down the columns and clamping the data and then exploring different options. So for here, we're trying to hit a target total sunlight hours of, anything around 230,000 hours is what we're going for. And we ended up pretty close to it. Anyway, this is still under construction digitally. We're working it out. So, here is just another project I did where I'm still researching how to figure out how to build this into a Grasshopper plugin, but this would be, we're deriving building heights from the Microsoft outline database, building footprint database, and we're taking that, we're extracting LiDAR data from USGS, and we're taking a digital terrain model and subtracting that from a digital elevation model. And with that, we also take and then we run a super resolution machine learning algorithm. And with those three things, we're able to calculate using a closest point algorithm how to figure out the building heights in any part of the world that has LiDAR data. Unfortunately, there isn't LiDAR data everywhere, but there's a good amount. So that's helpful because if you've ever used OpenStreetMaps, you'll realize that, well, you might not have building heights here, and then there goes your context model. That means you have to start modeling manually, which is always a pain. So this is a project we've been collaborating with Rensselaer Polytechnical Institute and the Department of Energy. And what we're doing is trying to save money by inventing new LEDs, basically. And these LEDs are tunable and steerable. So they follow you and they track you as you go through the room, but they don't move like, one of these party lights do. They just say they have thousands of pixels in one, and they're set to do to light up and not. So basically here we're using a non-negative least squares algorithm. That might sound like, but that's just that's a tried and true data algorithm. So that's actually part of Lunchbox. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll just kind of go. But anyway, this, we say, okay, we want to light the blackboard in the room. And we're given some LED files, and we have to see if we're able to do that. And not negatively square. Hello. It tries to do that the best it can. It can't ever do it perfect because lighting is, as you can see, it's a wash. But we're getting there pretty close, and the idea is to change the way LEDs are used in office situations and eventually save money. That's why the DOE has funded it. And here is just another way I'm working on passing data, because a lot of times, especially in BIM models in Rhino, well, BIM mainly, Revit, we have a lot of data. And I guess using Revit Forge, you probably don't use that here, but that's a way to pass data around. But so I worked on this this set of tools for Grasshopper that takes JSON formats, and we're able to pass that between different members of the project. So okay, that's what I do. I do a lot of design, a lot of regular design, but it seems in the past 3 years I've been with Line, everything I've done is confidential, so I just can't show it. So it looks like I'm doing kind of, boring coding stuff, but I mean, I think it's pretty fun. Anyway, so this is where I'm planning to go at Line. I'm not going to really explain it because I know I'm on a time crunch. So let's go back in time to 2017. And that puts me in this, well, it was a warehouse back then, and now I guess it's more of it's a lot nicer now. I like it a lot more now. So kudos. Anyway, this was a great project. I loved it. We did a cool Mars project. Got to work around in the so we melted glass on metal, which was really awesome. And we realized it's really difficult to melt glass, but theoretically it's possible on Mars. So we used sugar instead, as you can see up there. Otherwise, the mock-up was pretty fun to build. Moving further, some awesome robot stuff. At the time, it was interesting. I think it's still relevant, tracking and moving the robot based on object location. I don't really use this type of logic in what I do, but this logic helped me think the way I do, which is important because that's why I got hired. So the road from UCLA to Line. Let's see if I can read it from here. Here is better. Yeah. So I went to a 4-year or 3-year grad program after I was a musician after undergrad, and after I realized it was a bad career, I went to University of Miami for architecture, and they said, "Hey, at the job fair, they said, 'Have you heard of Line?' And I said, 'I don't know. I'm not actually looking for a job now because I'm going to UCLA.' And they said, 'Okay, we'll just take our card.' Forgot about it. Went to UCLA. So I went through the program, and then once I was done, I was in the situation of looking for a job. And I said, okay, well, I'm going around LA, and something that I was running into a lot was, okay, you have an awesome academic portfolio, but what have you built? I'm like, I just graduated. I haven't built anything. Like, come on. So I kept running into that problem, and I got frustrated. And I actually got a couple of job offers that weren't that appealing. And then I had a couple that were really interesting that were just taking too long. So I moved to Miami and took a job at a furniture shop. Not sure why, and that's why I wrote "not a great idea" above it. Anyway, my boss recently, I think, got arrested for stealing a U-Haul truck, and I was listed as a co-signer on that, so I got a call from the police. Anyway, after that, I went through an intensive job search everywhere. I was looking everywhere. And finally, I got hired at HKS in Miami in the hospitality department. It wasn't what I wanted to do at all. And I was doing actually a lot of visualization. They hired me because they wanted to really up their visualization group. So there's one way you can integrate it, because VR is basically accepted everywhere. Clients want to see it. But it was the type of, they wanted to move away from the type of VR that, say, like Enscape gives you, something more interactive. So we started doing that. Next thing you know, they threw me on projects, and they said, "Oh, we'll get to it." And I got frustrated. So I joined the competition, and I ended up winning that competition. And then I got in front of Line again because they were the jury for the competition. HKS, if you don't know, is one of the biggest architecture firms in the world. So they have a competition where they fly people in, and we all do a charrette, come up with a project, and present it. Anyway, I forgot to mention, right after I graduated from Super Studio, I sent the director an email at Line, and I'm like, he's not going to email me back. But he ended up emailing me back. He said, "Oh, well, love your stuff, but we're not hiring now." So I made up an excuse, and I flew to Dallas and said I had family there, which I do, but I had no intention of going there. So I made up like a fake interview, and I went there, and we talked, and yeah, he brought me in the back, and he said, here's what we're doing. He gave me a great tour, and he said, "Really, this is interesting, but we're not hiring now." I said, "Okay." So I went back, and then fortunately, or unfortunately, but one of their members of the development team quit. So he offered me the job, and I actually turned it down. And I went to this little green area, this small firm, which I hated with a passion. Not sure why I did that. It was because I was so sick of working on such large projects. I wanted to build something. So I quit. And I called him back, and I said, "I'm ready now." And I moved out to Dallas, and I took the job. And so that's that as far as Line goes. And other than that, I'm teaching. That's part of what Line does. And so right now I'm teaching in Dallas, and kind of my credo as far as that is to teach people how to think computationally. And I teach at the University of Texas at Arlington. And the part of the struggle we're running into is that a lot of that school, it's a great school, but they don't focus on computational tools. So nobody knows visual scripting. Nobody knows any sort of logic, or a lot of people have never used Rhino. And that's pretty normal. But so stuff like this is foreign. So I come up with, it's a pragmatic approach, but I say, okay, let's work on designing a process rather than actually making you use a program that you don't know how to use. So, a set of instructions, and what does it matter? The outcome's going to be different every time, but if you design the process and keep iterating through the process, that's what I want to see. And that was the first studio. This is one of the she was actually an art student who came up with the best project. So this is something that my students showed me today in class on Zoom, and I was pretty impressed. So I pulled it. We're doing a precast paneling project right now, and so we're taking one-to-many relationships and paneling it across. Morphosis did it. I'll show it another time, next time. Anyway, this is one-to-many paneling, the logic, but I won't focus on it because I've already run over by a few minutes. But anyway, thank you for having me. Oh, this is just some eye candy we used 2 years ago. Some of my students' work, some deep dream stuff. I don't know why it looks like that, but it's supposed to be a K and there's supposed to be an I there. So my name's Eric Broberg.
Just before I ask one of the questions, what I have to say is I love that you said brainstorming bad ideas, because I feel like consistently in class, and I know multiple times today, I said, this is a really bad idea, but, and then launched into it. So I appreciated that. Okay, so I guess just to start, first, thank you so much. I'm so happy that we have such a range. I've always believed that architecture is so much more broad, I think, than maybe what's in the dictionary for the definition. And that I think we kind of are hinting at what that encapsulates today. So thank you. I guess the first thing I want to talk about, or just ask to everyone, is how an architecture education, both in a traditional sense, but then of course how we expanded on that at Ideas, helps anyone kind of find a career, but then also succeed in, that's far outside of architecture. So I guess like super broad question, but.
Yeah, maybe on
Whatever
my
you want.
end would be short and sweet, different than my presentation. It would be really again, like exposure. I felt, at least in my case, as just being, as you said, just being aware of the fact that there are a lot of other, paths and kind of pathways that you can take. And again, just being able to see that not within the studio that each of us had, but also, through the interdisciplinary kind of collaborative atmosphere of Ideas at general. Each of these studios have different, very different kind of focuses. So I think in that sense, that seemed to be on my end, like the one that was really kind of pushing the courage to kind of go out of the, maybe a, well, let's say traditional, but like a conventional reading of architecture, or kind of like the way that it should be, rather kind of questioning, what I want it to be, or, so I think it is already built in within the Ideas kind of culture, I would say, as a platform that kind of gives you that exposure. And then the lecture series come around, LA's culture itself, and, like all of those other things. So I think for me might be that.
Does this work? Okay. So I think one thing that's very important that comes out of architecture education is that it's both very theoretical and also very technical. So it gives us this like very broad set of skills, and and develops our way of thinking and analyzing and looking at problems differently. That makes us more, say, resilient to whatever environment that we choose to be put in. So we become adaptable because of this wide range of set of skills. And then whenever you produce that, boom, you're put in front of a jury that just goes through every little detail of what you're doing, and you have to defend what you're doing when you're 18. So I think it really sets you for resiliency and adaptation.
I find that fascinating that you use the word resiliency, because I also agree. And I like to think about this, especially when we're teaching technologies that are changing so fast that you can't really say, well, now I'm an expert in Unity 2017.4 and like that's it. So I guess instead just thinking of it that it teaches you how to think, or the ability to be adaptable, or the ability to say it's fine, I'll figure it out when I get there. I guess to piggyback off of that, are there any sort of technologies that you are using now that you find very interesting, or any that are on the horizon that you either that you personally would want to get into, or that you find clients asking for?
I'm going to say that I am interested in what near real-time data could do and what it could mean for how we design spaces. So basically, how we can interpret different types of data collection to detect patterns for the users, how they interact with each other, the space, and all those implications that that would have for designers. So this is definitely something I'm looking forward to as it evolves, like the use of sensors and how we get this information from the spaces. And yeah, I would love to explore that.
Yeah, similar to that. See, we've basically achieved in almost real-time iterative, not, well, it depends on who's doing the modeling, but energy analysis to inform modeling technology. But as a studio, myself and my director, we're really interested in using ML or as an idea generator. So that is tricky because it's not like using ArchGAN, which is cool, but maybe it's not there yet, but we want to figure out a way to use AI. I'm using them interchangeably right now, but so we can contextually create as an idea generator, bounce ideas back and forth. I do it in music all the time. I use an AI when I'm writing music instead of another person, and I write an idea, and then the AI spits an idea that's similar, but they do like 6 versions of what I made. So then I choose pieces of that and put it together. We're looking to do the same thing with architecture right now, but we haven't gotten there yet. We're interested though.
I mean, step one is just kind of figuring out how it works, and then, so fair.
Yeah.
So kind of a tailored question to you, Sharifa, but, others feel free to join in, is can you talk about some of the challenges about, working on a project that has such a different scale than maybe what I laugh like as our studio is designing cities right now, but as opposed to designing on a single family home or.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is that actually as an urban designer or planner, working on a spectrum of scales that are urban design and planning. Because if you saw some of the project that I worked on are like 100 acres, and then the other one is the size of the country. So even like navigating how you control your focus on a certain scale while you're working, because you know how to work at that scale and this scale and this scale, and you have experience working in architecture. So it's kind of how you can control your focus. It's good to stay aware of all the different scales because everything informs everything. So similar to what I was mentioning about developing a set of design codes and standards for a neighborhood, it's also very beneficial to understand the scale of a single building and what goes within that and what happens when you are in the street and you open a door and now you're inside a building. This interface becomes very important. So I would say it's just the main challenge is getting lost into a rabbit hole of a single scale while you have to focus on the other. But, it's all fun.
So the question is, what are the challenges of switching scales?
Yeah.
Well, big problem for us is when our directors who, have been working for 30 years and don't know really any 3D modeling programs want us to do a city but have every building modeled down to the furniture level. That's a problem. So yeah, other than that, scaling down is quite nice in that regard. So
Solid answer. Love it. So I also really appreciate that everyone here is interested in academia, either like officially or just the idea of continually learning. And, you know, I also am obsessed with the learning curve and like refuse to give that up. I think you've all found very different ways of finding out how to do that at work. So originally this question was geared towards Ebrahim, but can you just talk a little bit about, you know, one, how did you get into academia, which is a very specific world, but also everyone else feel free to jump in and just in terms of like learning at work.
Sure, and I think that's a great question, and I can go on and on about the process, as probably everyone knows. But so for me, I think more than knowing what I want to do, I knew what I don't want to do. So honestly, I think that was really the bigger, like a bigger kind of driver, like the conversation and presentations we had. I like what Manya mentioned about curation of the portfolio for specific jobs, and what Eric mentioned about the feedback that you get from when you apply. I was not I couldn't give up on some of this stuff to take them out for the sake of maybe convincing someone in terms of maybe kind of negotiating. So I knew that because I was working in architectural firms back in Iran, so I knew that maybe I don't want to continue that. And within that process, I think was the time that Valerie actually offered to me or suggested, yes, you did, to join Ideas. Maybe I graduated in June, and like in August, she offered me to join as a teaching assistant. So that was the beginning of the fact that, okay, I mean, maybe it's an option, and it sounds fun, and it does all the things I wanted. And also, honestly, just being part of Greg's studio, I was looking up to him and seeing like he does what he wants. He teaches, he does research within the practice and academia, and that's more or less what exactly I want to do in terms of the balance. So more than like one step after the other, I felt like this is really the the medium for me, that I can be comfortable doing what I want to speculate upon or research based upon, and at the same time be still connected with partners and kind of industrial partners, at the same time receive live feedback from students and kind of reiterate. So maybe like during the past 9 years of teaching, I never repeated a course for the exact same reason. And it's getting actually to the point that I think I need to.
Wait, but like impressive.
It is a lot of work, as you know. So yeah, so 9 multiplied by 4 new courses. But so like that's for me, like I look at it more from the research perspective and as a way to kind of reiterate and recalibrate what I do. So in that sense, it was the best medium possible. Yeah.
I love it. I think I also see in terms of not being fully sure of what we want to work on or what we want to do in terms of like the one career, and giving ourselves the space to sort it out. And especially with your presentation, I'm like, yes, you fully covered just kind of the chaos of like not really sure. We're going to do a lot of things and then reconfigure those things. So I laughed. One of my questions was, I know a lot of our students are interested in working for a firm that might be in tech. Do you have any? And it's like, so thanks for that. But I guess can you talk a little bit more just about high level, some of the differences between working for a company like this versus not just necessarily architecture as in designing a home, but architectural in the more definitive sense?
Yes, I will say a big difference that is evident to me also because, like I explained, I worked really in the intersection of technological and spatial solutions, is the change in pace. And what I mean is that no matter how fast you design and build a project, developing a technological project is always much faster. And when you try to do something in the intersection of the two, space is always going to be left behind. Like there's just an inherent discrepancy. There's no way physical building is ever going to catch up to that. And it's very challenging. It's really a big pain point in many things. But I would say that a way to mitigate that is also something I'm personally very interested in. And that is, what if instead of just designing a solution with things that you know work now, and then until you build that solution, that the technology is outdated the way it moves now, you constantly keep thinking and iterating and developing multiple work streams for different possibilities about where that technology could go. It is really a very experimental process, I would say, but it is also very similar to what we were doing here at Ideas. I think agility is required, like you have to be very adaptable. It is a skill you have to build if you want to be working in that space. And yes, that's definitely a very big difference, the pace. And the second one, it is the impact. And of course, if you build an enormous skyscraper that everyone recognizes, it is impactful, not just visually, but also just to the urban grid, environmentally, everything. But it's still constrained to a degree from physical space. Now, if in tech, it can be so dissociated from physical space that really expands your base of users and who you can potentially affect, regardless of who they are and where they are located. So it's really impressive to think how many people you can affect when you are in that space versus architecture, which again, I'm going to say it is, I still believe architecture is very, very impactful, but imagine if you removed the spatial restrictions from it. So that's it.
So I might have one question to ask you then. I think it's $1 million question as far as architects that I've spoken to trying to transition to more of a tech role, whether it's tech in architecture or whether it's tech. It's like, how good of a coder do you have to be, or do you have to know how to code in general?
Okay. I will tell you that, of course, this, and I'm sure many people are curious. This really depends on the position. Like, I cannot imagine having your job and not knowing how to actually do all the Grasshopper and visual programming, really. However, and this kind of falls into the first question you said about architecture and how it prepares you for transitioning into other industries. It's interesting because I could be the best, I don't know, illustrator or the best animator out there, but I guarantee you that wouldn't be enough to do my job. I can be a good illustrator and animator, but you would be surprised to hear like how many presentations I have to do every week, how many meetings with very different partners and audiences I have to facilitate, or how I have to stay on top of the latest research and what that means and what implications it might have for our project. I need to keep citing. So all that stuff, not just the design, but what some of you might perceive as the boring stuff, like, I don't know, your critical studies and how you have to write really well and be careful how you cite. That's actually pretty relevant in that sense. And, you know, I would say that as I've collaborated with different people from different industries, it seems to me that more often than not, those that are the most well-rounded, so they can provide, they can do the research, they can do the presentation and cater the delivery of the information, but they can also produce. Those are usually people with a background in architecture, and that's very important to remember. We are very broad, like you said earlier. So,
But being too well-rounded is not good.
well, see, that's what I thought. actually.
Okay.
When I was graduating from undergrad, my issue was that all my classmates knew what they wanted to specialize in. I didn't know because I
Mhm.
just like a lot of things. That's why I said in the beginning, I am excited by like everything that makes my eyes goggle. You will notice that with me. If I like an idea, that's it. And I was never determined in terms of what I want to do. And that's why what attracted me to that job posting for the lab is that specifically they were looking for someone that can just take on anything, even if they don't know it. You can prove that, you know what, I don't know, I'll work on it and I'll figure it out. And I think that's definitely something that happens here at Ideas.
But I think also that's one of the exciting things about architects, just being generalist, you know, just being able to undertake a lot of questions, quote unquote, and or problems and develop solutions. And I don't like this binary at all, like of problem and solving problems, but just conceptually speaking. And I think that might be I mean, I think that's one of the things that we as architects are maybe better trained than other visual artists or media artists or like fields within the same medium of visual mediums, that we get trained to be generalists almost, so
Yeah, I completely agree with that. But I also, like, for example, I quit music for 10 years and then I started again after I quit Ideas, and I approached it completely differently for that reason.
yeah.
But one of the credos in line, at least from my director, is that he expects us to have a specialty as well as being a generalist, because having that mindset that we gain here, research, being inquisitive, problem solving, but you also need to have some kind of rock solid skill.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think it's just it's these are like maybe different parts of the puzzle, but I totally agree. There has to be at some point some sort of kind of narrow down into
And the ideal way is to have that happen organically.
Right.
Like as you experiment with the different things, you find yourself more passionate about developing your skills in one particular set of things that you're doing.
On the flip side, I'll take it back to what you said earlier, is that you might also just figure out what you don't want to do and start narrowing things down from there.
Processability.
Yeah, I mean, also useful. So just to be cognizant of the fact we have 10 more minutes, I was wondering if anyone from the audience, any students, any previous students just had any questions that they would like to ask? Anyone? Tess?
Sean.
Yeah, my question is, could you share some experience about looking for a job after graduating from this program? How could you make yourself stand out, or how did you overcome the stress or the difficulties? Because at this time, I believe most of us are facing such a situation. So it will be better if we can get such experience from you. Yeah, thank you.
Overcoming the stress. That's a tough one. Managing your expectations is something people say a lot. I'm not sure if I fully agree with that, but overcoming stress.
Yeah, I mean, I can use that for even right now. No, I think one thing for me is, that seems to be like a cost that we are going to pay anyways. So at least do it for something that you really enjoy. And I didn't want to get to those details like in my presentation, but like in my case, for instance, as an immigrant, that like the whole immigration process was crazy part of the journey, and it was slightly different than the MSAUD. So we had only 1 year. So I was on fire in terms of stress level, and the stress level was this high, and that was more or less the moment that I tried to at least do something, even if I do it for a short period of time, just to enjoy it. And I think that just somehow pays off the stress in a way. So at least you can, have some moments that you enjoy and then go back to the stress again. And I think I totally agree with what Eric said in terms of managing the expectation. I think that goes a long way too, to just, send out a lot of applications and don't be shy or don't be afraid. All of us, I think, I would say, some of us, we talk about it like personally on this meeting. And even in academia, we do a lot of applications and just one gets accepted. And I think it has nothing to do with your qualities. It has nothing to do with anything. There are a lot of other reasons, like, there are some moments in firms that they change, composition, same with, academic setups, all of that. So don't take it personal, don't take it really seriously, but just do it and do it the way that you like. I think that's really, at least somehow, the way that I think we can reduce stress.
But you should also know that everybody here has been accepted to this program. And I've never
Mhm.
met anybody that's gone to Super Studio that hasn't gotten a job that they want. So finding a job as a job is the way I looked at it. And also what you said about changing your portfolio to, I mean, I've got about 200 portfolios. And I even like when I was preparing my presentation for this, I had to go and like recraft it again. I was like, wow, I'm like applying for a job. But, every different studio, one focuses on this type of architecture, one's more tech-based, one more research, then applying for a teaching position. I have to curate every single portfolio. It takes all day, every day. And then you're going to interviews. So it's just a job, you just have to know that it's going to take some time, but you will find a job. Yeah.
I do want to add my top tip, which is actually, I think your journey is very exemplary of that. You would be surprised to know how many times I approached firms that I was very interested in working with that had no intention of hiring, no job postings. And not only they got back to me, but also after talking to me, they made me an offer. Because they could see it was really aligned with what I was looking to do. I'm not saying this is going to happen to everyone or for every case, but just don't be afraid to reach out. And I would say that UCLA, with all the classes that you take, the guests you have from time to time, and of course the faculty that's here, also offers you the opportunity of great networking. But here, and I'm pretty sure my dear husband would agree with that comment, I would also like to stress to everyone that there's a difference between just networking in general and substance-based networking. Make sure you know why you're approaching who you're approaching. It's not blind, and if it is blind, it shows and it's going to have the exact opposite result of what you're looking for.
Yeah, and that's a good point, though. I was thinking the opposite of that, especially for someone who's fresh out of college. And I'm not sure if, some of you have some experience prior to ideas and some of you don't. But I always think of just apply to everything that's available and apply to what's not available if that's what you want. And if you're underqualified, still apply. You may get called for an interview, and even if you know for a fact you're not going to get it, it's good practice. And one maybe just like, I'll say fuzzy advice that was given to my friend when we were back at Ideas, and our professor was Tom Main, and she went up to him and she's like, I'm going to apply. I'm nervous. What do I do? His advice was, and I completely agree with it, relax and be yourself. That's it. That was all the advice he gave her, because you made it all this way here and you're already developing your skills. So you have it in you. So let's go for it.
Amazing advice
I
in
know,
general.
right?
So is there one more question?
Only one.
You decide, Laura.
What?
decide who you want because we can take just one more.
No,
There's
man,
like-
don't put that on me. It's on you.
Raise your hand again. All right.
Thank you. First, thank you guys, all of you, for your great presentation. I'm Absin. I'm in Technology Studio. One of the main things that we explore in Technology Studio is VR and AR. My question is, let's say that's cyber world. My question is, what would be that, let's say, ring connecting this cyber world to physical world, and can have us end up with that cyber physical things, interactive cyber physical things. If you want, for instance, after ideas, we ourselves go and explore that things, what those areas should be, so we can end up with sort of interactive cyber physical design, interaction design. What should we go and learn or whatsoever?
Should I? Okay. I can maybe give a quick answer. I think it's actually raising more than before. So, you know, with the meta stuff, which they're kind of late in the game, but late in the party, but it's happening anyway. So, so I think part of it is just the fact that I think it's growing, and more than anything, it's becoming a new norm. But I think in my vision or in my reading of where would be a good place to for those kind of you know, developments, I can think of, you know, R&D place. Probably you can also talk about that, like R&D setups, whether in industry or academia. So one of the reasons I personally continue to work in academia was a little bit more freedom that it gives with, you know, these type of developments. I have good, you know, friends, and we knew each other that they were part of Google X. And actually, you may know Brendan Krusman and Jonathan Proto. They initiated SARS Robot Lab and everything. So we were talking at a conference about that, and I think that's one of the things that you get to have a little bit more freedom in experimental sense in an academic setup versus an industrial setup. So I think it might be interesting to examine it in the context of experimentation at large, you know, within that umbrella and wherever that is possible. So I would argue, and I'm biased, as you know, academia would be a good place, but I think there are industrial kind of platforms that are interested in that, or kind of a smaller kind of you know, R&Ds that are interested in things like that. And I think what you mentioned about just doing the work that you like, even as a kind of independent projects and things like that. And I think probably Sean can talk about iHeartLove in that sense. And you have a perfect example, right? So I think it started as a kind of personal project, and look at them now. So they're awesome, and everyone talks about them. So I think, you know, so it goes back to where I think just we're gonna go through a really kind of rough path anyways. So at least do something that you like, just to enjoy the road.
Yeah, don't try to like outsmart the system or something by predicting what's going to be the next big thing. That's not the way to go. So just do what you like, and I don't know if you end up being amazing in VR, but in a couple of years it's all dead and AR is the thing. I'm pretty sure that you'd be perfectly capable of doing the other if you've mastered one. Not because they're the same, because they're not, but because it's like languages. The more languages you speak, the better you become at learning new languages. So that's how I see it.
Totally fair. I definitely agree. So it is 9:01, so I'm only a minute late. Thank you again, everyone. Yeah, we're so pleased that you guys could all travel to come be with us today. Everyone, please stay and grab a taco and a drink, and I'll see you out there.
Thank you.